And the recording has been started.
All right, so good morning and welcome everyone. This is a hearing in the matter of the encroachment permit application number L-95-S-6002 from Justin Sternberg as trustee of the Justin L. Sternberg Living Trust. This is case number CC-2022-NAV-22-001 before the State Board of Land Commissioners regarding the application that Mr. Sternberg, as trustee, submitted for a dock that the city of Coeur d'Alene objected to because it's designated as a public swimming area. So this hearing is recorded, as you know, via Zoom. And so what we'll do here is we'll give the applicant a moment to address his application, and then if there's any objectors, Ms. Kaufman, do we have someone from the city on the line who we're expecting to participate as part of their objection today? Do you know that?
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. I am not sure, but I see, I know Mike Gridley is the attorney for the city, and I see that someone with the name Mike on the Zoom has turned his mic off. So I assume that that would be him. So I'll let him speak.
Okay.
Can you hear me? This is Mike Gridley.
Yeah, we can hear you, Mr. Gridley.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure. I noted, you know, in the case documents that the city did file the statement of opposition and noted that the DuPont case, rather, but I was not sure who or if anyone was going to participate in this hearing. So
I think we also have our Parks Director, Bill Greenwood, on the line, or he was supposed to Zoom in to participate if necessary. And so we're available for comments and any information.
Mike, I'm on board.
Okay, Bill Greenwood, our Parks Director, is on board.
Okay, thank you. And Mike, could you just spell your last name real quick, just for my notes?
Sure, it's Gridley, Gridley. And I'm the
Gotcha.
city attorney in Coeur d'Alene.
Gotcha, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and then we also have Ms. Kaufman, who we just spoke to, and Mr. Mike Amer from the Department of Lands, and they of course filed a statement, a hearing statement regarding this case that's part of the record, and we'll give them a chance to participate in this hearing as well. So any documents that were submitted, whether they be comments, opposition, comments in support, and so on, are all admitted as part of the record of this case, and they can be referred to by the parties as we're having the hearing, and can be referred to by me when I'm writing the decision on this matter. My decision will not be made over the phone this morning. It will follow in writing within 30 days from today's hearing date. And so in terms of how this will work, I explained we'll first give Mr. Sternberg a chance to speak, and then any objectors of opposition, and then the Department of Lands, and then we'll open it up for other comments. I know some people supported the application, and we'll give them a chance to talk as well. And so this is not as formal as a courtroom. This is an administrative proceeding, not civil, not criminal. So it's not as formal as a court process would be. We just want to keep it orderly and make sure everyone has a chance to say what they need to say regarding the issue at hand. We do swear in witnesses though, and so before you can offer testimony, I'll just swear you in real quick and then give you a chance to talk. And that's pretty much it for the preliminary items as the way this will work. So let's go ahead and go to Mr. Sternberg at this time. And I don't know, Mr. Sternberg, if you're having a representative help represent you with this case today, or
Mr. Hearing Officer, I'm Jonathan France. I'm the attorney for Mr. Sternberg.
Gotcha. Okay. Apologize for that. I know I saw your name in the materials somewhere, but I wasn't quite sure if you would be participating today. So appreciate you for speaking up and representing Mr. Sternberg. So at this time, you can make a statement. You can make, you can just describe your application in a general argument, and basically I'll hear whatever you have to say at this time.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to call and I understand we're more formal, but you know, our business is our business. So I would like to call Mr. Sternberg as a brief witness.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Mr. Sternberg, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
All right, Mr. Sternberg, would you please state your first and last name, and we'll forego spelling it, but if you would state your first and last name for the record, that'd be great.
Justin Sternberg.
And you live at the address that was stated on your application for an encroachment permit?
Correct. 721 West Lakeshore Drive, Coeur d'Alene.
And do you live there year round?
Yes, I do.
Are you there presently?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so have you had an opportunity to review some of the written statements, particularly the written statement that was submitted by the city of Coeur d'Alene, as well as the Idaho Department of Lands written statement?
Yes, I have.
So there's been a lot of references to some buoys marking a swimming area out in front of your house. Are there any buoys out there marking that swimming area presently?
No.
How long have you resided at your address there?
5, 6, 7 years.
Have you ever seen buoys out in front of your house in the water year round?
No.
Have you ever had an opportunity to go up and examine those buoys?
Yes, I've swum out to them before.
And are there any markings? Can you tell me what the buoys look like?
They're white cylinder looking buoys, probably 4, 3, 2 feet out of the ground, depending on the buoy. Some may have an orange stripe, some may not. And as far as I believe, there's no markings on them.
Okay, and when you said they're 3, 4 feet out of the ground, did you mean they're 3, 4 feet out of the water?
Correct.
Okay, and you said there's no markings on them. There's no words on the buoys?
As far as I know, there are no words on the buoys.
Is there anything that indicates that they're there for a swimming area?
No.
Is there anything that indicates there's a prohibition on any motorboat traffic going past those?
No.
Okay. Do you by any chance, sir, have in front of you the encroachment permit that was obtained by the city of Coeur d'Alene? It was submitted as in the bottom corner of the page, it's submitted as IDL-7.
Are you referring to myself, Justin, or the?
Yes, to you.
I can pull it up. I don't have it in front of me this very second, but yes.
Okay, yeah, if you could pull that up just briefly. It's one of the exhibits that was attached to the hearing statement that was prepared by the Department of Lands.
Okay.
So one of the exhibits is labeled IDL-7. If you could go to the of the entire document, it's I'm referencing page 39. Forgive me, I am referencing page 44. It should be an aerial map, and it has some locations marked on it, some red dots out in the water that are marked with a WL and then 01 through 05.
Interesting. My document has 38 pages, so perhaps I don't have the exact exhibit you have. On my exhibit, I do have something very similar, but on a different page.
Oh, okay. That's just fine. We're looking at that. Is that a true and correct aerial map that you're looking at there of the waterfront in front of your property?
Well, obviously over time it probably changes, but it's relatively close.
Okay. So are you familiar with where the swim areas are for the city of Coeur d'Alene near your property?
Well, no, because I wasn't aware that there was a designated swim area.
And when you say you weren't aware there was a designated swim area, you're referencing directly in front of your property. Is that correct?
Correct.
Are you aware of a designated swim area that's within a couple hundred yards of your property?
Again, there was buoys out there that unfamiliar with, that I guess people would assume, hey, please don't go past those buoys or not. But no, I have no exact determination of what those buoys were for.
And so again, sorry, and I apologize, I'm not actually referencing buoys. Do you see looking at that map that we were referencing there, you see where there's got a red dot, it's WL01.
Correct.
And you can see there's a line, it's faint, but you can see there's a line that goes through the area where that buoy is present. Do you see that?
I do see that.
Do you know what that line represents?
I have no idea.
Okay. That's fine. Have you live there at your property year round, is that correct?
Yes.
And does that part of the lake freeze over?
No.
Have you ever seen, outside of May to October, have you ever seen any boats out on the lake?
All the time, every day.
And is there anything other than laws and things that are being discussed at today? Are there any physical impediments to anybody boating out in front of your property outside of the months of May to October?
No. Well, I would say that there is one, and I'm looking at it. I think there's one or two pilings out there that people probably would not want to hit.
Okay, but no ice buildup. There's still water out there. The lake doesn't dry up.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. That is all of my questions.
And I had a question. I was trying to take notes here on my end, but did Mr. Sternberg say he sees boats October through May or May through October?
The question was October through May. And Mr. Sternberg,
Okay.
if you would like to chime in for verification.
Yeah, so there's boats all day, every day. The resort has cruise boats. Currently, there's a few other boats going across the lake. There's fishermen boats all the time. There's barges daily, and I don't want to say daily, but often. So there's lake traffic every single day of the year. You know, as far as I know, I don't know if there's on Christmas, but there is definitely lake traffic every day.
Right. And so I think part of the point your attorney was making is that the lake does not freeze over, and lakes are common there pretty much year round, even in wintertime, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I didn't have any more questions for Mr. Sternberg. Mr. Gridley from the city, did you have any questions for Mr. Sternberg?
No, I think the only thing I want to clarify is his testimony about boats on the lake. The boats are, certainly there are boats on the lake, but they're not running up and down in that area, you know, that we would designate a swim area, I don't think. Is that correct?
And so that would be close to shore, you mean, Mr.
Right.
Gridley?
Right.
Okay. Mr. Sternberg, I don't know if you understood the question there, but the city attorney is basically saying that they acknowledge there's boats on the lake and year round, but not necessarily up and down the shore right outside of your property where your proposed dock would be. Has that been your experience?
That's a tough question. What I would say is there are often fishermen boats, and often, I don't want to use that word. There have been fishermen boats that come in and come close to the shoreline or come, I don't know where the designated swim area actually is. There's no line or anything currently, but boats do come in and you can see them cast and fish and whatever else. So it's not, I don't see one boat out there right now, but there definitely are boats out there year round.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ms.
That's
Kaufman?
all. That's all.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Gridley. Ms. Kaufman, did you have any questions at this time for Mr. Sternberg?
You know, I just have a question, and it's probably more directed towards Mr. France. And just to be clear, it's just to clarify, I want to make sure that I was looking at the right exhibit during the testimony. Mr. France, when you look at IDL's statement with the exhibits, it's 45 pages. And were you referencing page 44 or 45? Is that the one you were working from when you were questioning Mr. Sternberg?
I was, if Mr. Hearing Examiner, if you're okay, I'm happy to do a screen share so I can just show everybody which page. Is that permissible?
Yeah, that's fine.
Because
That would be
it
helpful.
comes up in mine as only 44 pages. And so we've all, I guess that's disabled. It is the last page of the IDL Exhibit 7. So
Okay.
you'll see there's the hand-drawn map, and then it goes to an aerial map. And that aerial map, you can see the airplane dock that's just to the, it's oriented, north is not facing up, but you can see the airplane dock, and then it shows proposed locations for 5 buoys that go out in front of the Mr. Sternberg's property.
Okay, thank you, council. That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer.
Okay, and just, I'm looking at that map as well. So the WL01, 02, 03, 04, 05 with the red dots, that is marking proposed buoys. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Franz?
That is correct, Your Honor. That's the buoys that were, that's the buoy locations that were submitted with the encroachment permit that was granted to the city of Coeur d'Alene. It is a part of the record and was added into the statement by Idaho Department of Lands. That was an encroachment permit that's L-95-S-2809C and D.
Okay. All right, thank you.
One of the other things, just while we're talking about it, that I would like to point out, in that encroachment permit number, as you're looking, this is again in that same exhibit. It's on the second page of that exhibit that was marked IDL-7. If you look under the second page, there's the opening paragraph where it states the encroachment permit number, and states permission is hereby granted to City of Coeur d'Alene for regulatory buoys, and then references Sander Beach and City Beach. And it does reference that May to October period. So that's actually referenced in the application. And let me back up just real briefly. Is it okay if I continue with presenting our
Yes,
case?
of course.
Okay. So one of the other things that I think is in there is we've got that's backed up by the testimony by Mr. Sternberg, who pointed out that there are no buoys out there right now. The buoys are not there year round. And the permit itself that was filed by the city of Coeur d'Alene states this May to October period. So we've got this limited period of time that we're working with. So Mr. Sternberg's application, I'm not going to cover it in detail, but it is for a dock that is right in between, so you have a point of reference. It's right just to the bottom. His house and where the dock would be just to the bottom of that point, looking at that same map, that point that's marked WL04. So his property is just, as the page is oriented, just below that. That's where he's at. So he'd be in between WL04 and point WL05. So he would be located right in there. The swim area, if I can just briefly jump into the Coeur d'Alene city law, there are city of Coeur d'Alene, when it went and passed its ordinance, it does break into 2 different categories, some swim areas. And this is referencing Idaho Department of Lands Exhibit 6. It's they actually provide the city ordinance that references restrictions on use of waterways within the city. So I'd like to point out that there's 2 different types of swimming areas. There's a swimming area, and then there's a swimming only area. The city uses those 2 designations, and it has different restrictions between the 2. So a swimming only area is swimming. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's swimming only, and it's has a prohibition on all boats, on all motorized boats. There's just none are allowed. However, the areas that are designated as swimming areas, again, swimming only and swimming, we're talking about swimming areas. If you look at it, the statute or the ordinance actually contemplates boats 20 feet or shorter being permitted in those areas. And this is under Ordinance 4.20.020. Subparagraph A, you'll see that it says, no person shall operate, navigate, moor, or anchor to any motor-driven watercraft or toy boat of any length longer than 20 feet within designated public swimming areas created by this chapter. So so the city contemplates having an area that's designated for swimming, but it allows shorter boats. So 20 feet or less. Okay. Now you'll also notice let me pull up the, one moment. You'll notice from the, let's just stick with that same map. You'll notice you've got that WL01 and that WL02. So you see that line going through there. Mr. Sternberg didn't recall, seeing that, and he probably doesn't go over there that often, seeing as how he's got his own waterfront. But that area right there, you see a faint line that goes over there, and then it goes in towards the city park right at the beach. And that area is the area that is designated by the city of Coeur d'Alene as a swimming only area. So they have right there a swimming only area, which complete prohibition on boats. And then beyond that, as you go farther from point WL02, as you go farther down the page, that happens to be the direction of west, as you go farther down the page, that is all a swimming area. So the city code contemplates allowing boats 20 feet and shorter to boat in that area. And that is plain and simple right from the code. You can look at, if you wanted to further verify the location of where these designated public swimming areas are, those are further on in that same exhibit, the IDL-6. The next page, it's got 4.20.030. That's where they designate the public swimming areas. They designate a swimming area, and then they designate the swimming only area. Again, I can't clarify enough. We are not in a swimming only area. Okay. So continuing through the city code, we've got on the next page, we've got city ordinance 4.20.070. This references the buoys. This city ordinance was put in shortly before, my understanding is it was amended at least shortly before those buoys were put in place on the map that we're referencing on exhibit IDL-7. So there the city ordinance states buoys, the restrictions and the restricted areas established by this chapter may be indicated by appropriate buoys approved by the Idaho Department of Lands. Okay, so those are the buoys that we're referencing, those WL01 through WL05. Those are the buoys that it's referencing. So keep in mind that below WL02 to WL05, the only restriction is boats in excess of 20 feet. It's not a restriction on boats. Okay, and you heard some further testimony, and I don't believe anybody has anything contrary to say to it, at least not as of yet, but Mr. Sternberg has examined those last year, and the buoys that are out there don't have any marking saying no boats. And per city code, it shouldn't, because boats are indeed allowed. So we've got a series of objections that are based around a couple of things. One being the Idaho Safe Boating Act. That's been referenced, and the city has objected and referenced that, as did Idaho Department of Lands. However, I think it's really important to go through. It's a very short statute. This is Idaho Code 67-7026. It states, restricted areas. It's unlawful for any person to operate a vessel on the water of this state in any area which has been clearly marked in accordance with and is authorized by the laws of this state by buoys or some other distinguishing device as a bathing, swimming, or other restricted area. Okay, so that's the the Idaho Safe Boating Act that's referenced. Here, we don't have buoys that are clearly marked indicating that boats aren't allowed in there. So this argument that that boats can't be allowed to go up to the dock that Mr. Sternberg is applying for, it's really truly a red herring. We don't have anything that triggers the application of Idaho Code 67-7026 because we don't have any buoys clearly marking that, for one. And for another, the city code should not allow that to be clearly marked that way because the only restriction is on boats in excess of 20 feet. Moreover, we're also talking about a use that exists for only a part of the year. This is what I refer to as my throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Here we've got objections saying, okay, let's say that no boats could go in there while those buoys are placed. I think I've already gone through and shown why that's not accurate. But even if that were accurate, that's only accurate while the buoys are there, and those buoys are only placed somewhere between May and October. That's half of the year. We've got boats that are out there, and sure, there may not be lots of boat traffic driving right off the beach, but there are fisher boats. There are other boats that are out on Lake Coeur d'Alene, and there's no physical impediment to Mr. Sternberg using the dock for the remaining 6 months of the year for moorage purposes. So I think to sit there and say, well, even if Mr. Hearing Officer, you reach the conclusion that Mr. Sternberg could not navigate a boat to his dock, that's only applicable for less than half of the year. That's not even the whole year round. And we'd be throwing the baby out with the bathwater to say, well, if you can't do it for 6 months, we're not going to let you do it at all, even though there's still a great part of the year that's left open for it. Furthermore, Mr. Sternberg is a year-round resident right there. It's not like this is his summer home, and it would be form over substance here. We've got somebody who lives there year-round, has lived there year-round for 6+ years. And there's year-round available recreation and use of the lake that he could make use of and have boat moorage on the dock if approved. So the last thing that I would like to address, Mr. Hearing Officer, is the DuPont case. You know, there's obviously the city has submitted the DuPont case. So has Idaho Department of Lands. And the one thing that I struggle with the DuPont case is I feel like it's being treated almost like it's a mandatory, oh, the DuPont case says we have to deny this application. But that's not what's actually stated in the DuPont case. And that's not the procedural posture that was presented there. The DuPont case stands for the premise that the Department of Lands could, that's a may. This is a permissive, but it's not mandatory. We don't have to deny it because of that. We have an application, we have an applicant who's there year-round, can use the dock in compliance with state law, can use the dock in compliance with the city ordinance. You know, I find this a little tough when the city is objecting to this dock when it's contemplated by the city ordinance. Boating in there for watercraft 20 feet or smaller is contemplated by their very own ordinance. And the city apparently didn't find it meritorious to go and say no boating whatsoever. And I certainly hope I'm not encouraging them to go and do that. But the point being is boating up to Mr. Sternberg's dock is not prohibited. It is allowed. It's the city, when it was writing its ordinances, contemplated that boaters should be allowed in there. They didn't put a blanket prohibition on it. And the Idaho Safe Boater Act doesn't prohibit it either. While perhaps this, perhaps the board, the Idaho Department of Lands board does have the ability to reject because some of these items, DuPont certainly does not stand for the fact that it must. It stands for the fact that it's a permissive may at best. So with that being said, I think I've hit all of the highlights. I don't know if you have any other questions. If looking at that map, you're able to get a good idea of where the water is, where the swimming area versus the swimming only area is. Those are some really important distinctions here because, so I guess I don't know if you have any questions on that or if that's, or maybe you're a frequenter of Coeur d'Alene. I don't know. I
appreciate using the map, and it makes sense to me of where city park is compared to where Mr. Sternberg's residence is and where the proposed dock would be. And so, and that all makes sense. And so I appreciate the visual help there. I just had a question. I noted in Department of Lands hearing statement that the dock specs are within code, right? It's not too big of a dock. It's not anything that violates the spacing. But I was curious about if you have an opinion on, I understand your argument that boats are allowed, especially 6 months out of the year, they're allowed, and especially if they're 20 feet or smaller, given the swim area, not the swim only area. Do you think a designated swim area has any restrictions on a dock though, as opposed to a boat?
I don't, and if you go through and look at the, if you go through and look at the actual city ordinance, there is no such prohibition set forth in there. It doesn't contemplate any such prohibition. And I think, yeah, I mean, that's all I'm going to say is I don't believe it does, because it's completely silent on the issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Is there anything else you would like to say or your client would like to say at this time?
At this time, Mr. Sternberg, unless you have anything you'd like to add, I think I've said what I set forth to convey.
Nope, I believe Jonathan covered our position.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, let's give the city a chance to weigh in here. And so we can hear from Parks, or we can hear from the city. Mr. Gridley, was there anything you wanted to address at this point regarding the position of the applicant?
Yeah, I guess I would say there's really no bathwater for the baby that we got here. If you read 4.2, as cited to repeatedly, it says no person shall operate, navigate, cause to float, moor or anchor any motor-driven watercraft or toy boat of any length. I don't know what he's saying. So our position is the ordinance clearly prohibits that. State law allows us as a municipality to designate swimming areas. We have designated that by ordinance. And the buoys, I could ask Mr. Greenwood to speak to the buoy issue. I think they are placed, or when they are placed and why they are placed and taken out from time to time. But we're clearly authorized to do that. Again, city law or city ordinance has designated this. And it's within a swimming area. So I'm following, it's clear that Justice Trout, when that case was written back in 2000, found that special circumstances or unusual circumstances, I'm sorry, I don't have the case right in front of me right now, but exists there. And I think no one in this hearing would deny that the shoreline along City Park between the Coeur d'Alene Resort, or between City Beach and NIC Beach, is not a special place that is used by literally hundreds of thousands of people every year. Children, athletes, training. We have an international Ironman competition, or Ironman competition that's attended by athletes from all over the world. And people train there, swim there, long distance. So it's just not an appropriate place to build any kind of encroachment that would invite misinformed boaters, again, of any length, to come in there. I think it's a hazard to the greater community of users. Bill Greenwood, are you on the phone right now?
I'm here, Mike.
Could you explain how we handle the the buoys
Sure.
out there. Bill
Glad to speak to
has
that.
been in charge of lake waterfront since 1999 and is currently the park director. Has been that for a number of years. So I think he has probably more experience and knowledge than any of us about how that has been used.
All right, Mr. Greenwood, do you swear to tell
sir.
the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
So the question about the buoys, yes, they're being moved seasonally. I've been having some discussion with the county about possibly leaving those in year round. They become problematic to move for us. We don't own a boat, so I rely on Nick over there in the county to help us out with his team to move those buoys in and out, as it said, May to October. The buoys are out there usually just before Memorial Day. They are designated. Suggest they're not is not true. If anybody that boats understands designations on buoys, it's a diamond, which means it's a swim area, which means no boats. So these pencil buoys have a designation on them that's a diamond with a cross in it that says below that, no boats allowed. It's been that way since I've been out there putting buoys since 1999. It goes all the way to Hubbard, all the way to Independence Point Steps. The suggestion about the differences in the swim areas only, that had to do some years ago when we actually had a buoy line set up for our lifeguards. Some years ago, we stopped using lifeguards to the difficulty of not being able to find help to be lifeguards on the beach. So it was problematic. People thought that there was a designated swim area with a lifeguard and we could no longer provide that service. So some years ago, City Council opted not to have lifeguards. And that's that designation about the swim area only. There was a rope line buoy that our lifeguards would put out within the jurisdiction of those buoys themselves as that swim area only. As far, and it's interesting too, if you look at this last picture of the buoys, you'll see it's kind of a tell right here. At the bottom of the page, there's buoys, and at the bottom of the page, there's a boat outside the buoy line. Right there where it says IDL-7, that's a boat staying outside buoy lines. So that's a real indication of where people who actually know how to read buoys understand that you're not allowed in this area because of the designation of those said buoys.
All right, thank you, Mr. Greenwood.
You bet.
Mr. Gridley, did you want Mr. Greenwood to address anything else?
No, thank you, sir. I think we've covered that. I think the only additional point I would make is that because of the special nature of this location and the longstanding existence of a swimming area and the appropriate designation, I think the problem is the slippery slope. If one dock or encroachment application is allowed, then there would be a number of them, and this community used or valuable community asset would be lost, basically would be destroyed, because it would be totally unsafe to have a series of docks stringing down that lake. So we strongly oppose the granting of the application for an encroachment. Thank you.
Mr. Gridley, and is that part of the city's position on this, that it would not be just Mr. Sternberg's dock, but it would invite other docks? Because Mr. Sternberg's dock would be past the buoy 4 in front of 5. So it's kind of it's towards the end of that buoy line.
Right, but it's not, it would be within the designated swimming area by our ordinance, which is clearly, so if you have the exhibit, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exhibits in front of me, but we submitted a map, an aerial photo that shows the placement of the municipal ordinance designated swimming area. And it includes the area clearly in front of his house. So, the fact that there's a buoy right in front of his house or not, it's something that we've designated as a swimming area.
Okay. All right, thank
I don't know
you.
if that makes sense.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, anything else to say at this time?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Mr. Hearing
Mr.
examiner,
Fritz?
I do have a question for Mr. Greenwood, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Greenwood,
Yes,
when
sir.
was the last time that you paint, the diamond that you're saying is on these buoys?
Mhm.
Is that painted or is that a sticker?
Yeah, is we order those from a marine company, and they're already on there. Occasionally they get busted up. Both they'll get worn out because of just sun damage, and we'll have to put wraps on them. But normally they just come with that designation.
So when was the last time you rewrapped it or reapplied those stickers?
Well, we put them out every year, as I said. So they're on there when we put them out. So I don't know. They're not out right now, as you stated. So I don't know when we put them out. They're white buoys. They have a designation with a diamond, says no boats. There's an orange band on the top and an orange band on the bottom.
All right, thank you. That's all I
Yeah,
wanted.
sure. And when my staff puts those out again this year, I'll make certain that, they're not putting out something that's the wrong designation, but that's what our permit allows us to do, and that's what we've done.
So, Mr. Hearing Examiner, I don't have any further questions for Mr. Greenwood. I don't know if anybody else does. Would you like me to kind of save my rebuttal for later?
Yeah, if you can do that, let's give the Department of Lands a chance to weigh in here, and then I'll still come back to you and give you a chance to say anything that you want to say, Mr. France.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Kaufman, let's go to you and Mr. Amer and give you a chance to, one, address your hearing statement and anything else regarding the testimony that has been given so far. So, Mr. Amer, I'll ask you, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth this morning?
Yes, I do, Mr. Hearing Officer.
All right, Ms. Kaufman, did you want to say anything at the start, or did you just want Mr. Amer to address the hearing statement?
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. I'd like to say a couple things in the nature of legal argument at the outset before Mr. Amer provides his hearing statement, if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure. So first of all, I have to echo what the city attorney, Mr. Gridley, said about the reading of the city code, specifically section 4.20.020.A.1. If you read it carefully, the accurate reading is no person shall operate, navigate, cause to float, moor, or anchor any motor-driven watercraft or toy boat of any length within designated public swimming areas created by this chapter. So that the allowance for vessels longer or shorter than 20 feet within those designated public swimming areas applies only to sail-powered vessels. It doesn't apply to any watercraft whatsoever. So I would note that. The other thing, and this is just about the buoys that are used to mark the swim area, according to the Idaho Safe Boating Rules, which are IDAPA 26.01.30. And I'm looking at Rule 500 of those rules. It's the Idaho Waterway Marking System. And so Rule 500.02 defines regulatory markers in general, providing that they're used to indicate to a vessel operator the existence of a dangerous areas, as well as those which are restricted or controlled, such as speed zones or areas dedicated to a particular use. And then you go down to Rule 500.04, and it provides that when a buoy is used as a regulatory marker, it must be white with horizontal bands of international orange placed completely around the buoy's circumference. And that rule then, Rule 500.04 goes on to say, one band must be at the top of the buoy body with a second band placed just above the water line of the buoy so that both international orange bands are clearly visible to approaching vessels. The area of the buoy body visible between the two bands must be white. And then Rule 500.05 talks about the geometric shapes, and I believe this is what Mr. Greenwood's testimony was talking about. 500.05.B says that a vertical open-faced diamond shape having a cross centered in the diamond to mean that a vessel is excluded from the marked area. So I provide that information by way of legal argument, just to note that buoys are regulated under the Idaho Safe Boating Act. Boaters are charged with knowing what they mean in terms of where they're allowed to go and not, even though there may not be specific words on those buoys. So with that, if you don't have any questions for me, Mr. Hearing Officer, I'll just defer now to Mr. Amer to present IDL's hearing statement.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Go ahead, Mr. Amer.
Mr. Hearing Officer, before I begin, I'd like to make a couple comments.
Sure.
In regards to Bill Greenwood's testimony, he briefly mentioned Nick. Nick is in reference to Nick Snyder, who is the director of Kootenai County Parks and Waterways. They're the entity that we usually issue permits to for the buoys, and they're the ones that install them. I believe Mr. Greenwood also mentioned the reason that they aren't year-round. It's typically because the buoys get damaged in the ice. When the lake freezes over or when the water goes down, the chain that connects the buoy to the lake bed could kind of change length. So one of the things that Nick and his group have done recently is installed bigger, more robust year-round buoys. This is a newer thing that they've been working on. There's some on the Spokane River, and it would allow his team to not have to deploy them every spring and take them out every fall. And they are starting to replace a lot of the smaller buoys with these ones. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that would happen in the future. And then in regards to Mr. Gridley's testimony, Mr. Sternberg's property is one of 13 lots in that area. So if a permit was issued for an encroachment permit was issued for a dock in this location, it would come to make sense that there could be 12 other encroachments in the same area. There's one of 13. And then on that figure that everyone keeps referencing, the IDL 7 that mentions WL 01 through 05, I'm not sure if it came out clear enough, but the swimming area extends all the way to Hubbard Street. And if you're looking at that exhibit, you could see Hubbard in the upper left-hand corner there. Hubbard Street comes down. So just want to make sure that everyone understands that the swimming area goes all the way to that Hubbard Street area. And then with that, I'll get into my testimony. And as typical, Mr. Hearing Officer, I will skip over section 2 of the statement where we reference all the applicable rules to kind of in light that everyone has the statement and to kind of just make it a little bit of a shorter statement. Good morning. My name is Mike Amer. I am a lands resource supervisor for the MICA Supervisory Area Office of the Idaho Department of Lands. And I am the supervisor of the Navigable Waters Program at IDL. My purpose in being here today is to provide you with information regarding IDL's assessment of application for encroachment permit L95S6002, filed by Justin Sternberg on behalf of the Justin L. Sternberg Living Trust, which owns property at 721 West Lakeshore Drive, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, 83814. For the application, Sternberg is seeking an encroachment permit for a single-family dock located on the northern shore of Lake Coeur d'Alene, just east of North Idaho College and west of the city park in Independence Point. The proposed single-family dock would consist of a 4x15 pier, 3x20 ramp, 6x30 approach, and 40x10 T-shaped dock comprising 700 feet. I'd like to note that on page 2 of the application, it says the dock would be 580 square feet, but that is just the main T portion. The entire dock would comprise 700 square feet. And currently, Sternberg does not have an existing encroachment permit for this property. For the timeline, on January 19th of 2022, IDL received an application for a single family dock. On January 20th, 2022, IDL sent adjacent neighbor notices to the Linda Jean Shervanian Family Trust and William F. Boyd. On January 28th, 2022, IDL called Sternberg requesting a copy of the property's deed to help determine littoral rights. And then also on January 28, 2022, Mr. Sternberg emailed IDL a copy of that deed. On February 3rd, 2022, IDL corresponded via email with Sternberg regarding his application and the fact that pursuant to the City of Coeur d'Alene's municipal code, the beach in front of his property had been designated as a public swimming area. On February 3rd, 2022, IDL received an email from Linda Stroh in support of the application. On February 4th, 2022, IDL mailed adjacent notices with the revised and complete application to William F. Boyd, the adjacent property owner to the west of Sternberg's property, and to the Linda Jean Trevanian Family Trust, Rick and Roxanne Gunther Living Trust, Ken Ray Cooper Living Trust, and the Stroh Family Trust, all of whom are adjacent property owners to the east of Sternberg's property. Also on February 4th, 2022, IDL informed Sternberg that IDL would call for a contested case hearing, even if none of the neighbors requested a hearing. IDL confirmed with Sternberg that he would not withdraw the application. On February 14th, 2022, IDL emailed with the City of Coeur d'Alene regarding the application and hearing. On February 15th, 2022, the City of Coeur d'Alene informed IDL that it would be submitting comments in opposition to the application. And finally, on February 17th, 2022, IDL's director issued a notice of appointment of hearing officer and hearing. As stated before, I will skip section 2 that talks about the applicable rules that IDL reviewed while processing the application and move on to page 7, section 3, IDL's analysis of the application's compliance with the LPA and LPA rules. Littoral ownership. Sternberg owns parcel ID number C-3420-001-003-A, which is also known as 721 West Lakeshore Drive. Initially, IDL was uncertain whether Sternberg has littoral rights because while the deed he provided with his application describes his lot, it does not mention the property extending to the quote unquote shore of the lake, quote unquote high watermark, quote unquote water, quote unquote shoreline, or quote lake, all of which are terms commonly used in deeds to describe littoral property on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Application page 23 through 24 of 41. However, while assisting IDL with preparing for this hearing, IDL's counsel found a recorded judgment quieting title to Sternberg's predecessor as follows. All of that land which lies between the state-owned bed of Lake Coeur d'Alene and the east-west extended property lines of the following described property, Lot 3, Block 1, and Lot 3, Block 2, Finch's subdivision of lots 32, 51 and 52 of Sherman Park Edition, and part of government lots 43 and 45, section 14, township 50 north, range 4 west, Boise Meridian, Kootenai County, Idaho, together with all riparian and littoral rights and privileges to Lake Coeur d'Alene. Under exhibit IDL-5, given that judgment, it appears that Sternberg is a littoral property owner with littoral rights. He owns approximately 75 feet of water frontage. The type of encroachment, Sternberg is seeking an encroachment permit for a single family dock. The application type would be considered a navigational encroachment. Shoreline length, as stated above, Sternberg owns approximately 75 feet of water frontage, which is sufficient water frontage for navigational encroachment per IDAPA 20.03.04.010.36. For the square footage of encroachments, IDAPA 20.03.04.015.01B provides that a single family dock may not exceed 700 square feet of total surface decking area waterward of the ordinary high water mark. Sternberg's proposed dock would be exactly 700 square feet in size. For line of navigability, the proposed single family dock would extend outward into the lake 75 feet. There are no single family docks adjacent to the Sternberg property, making it difficult to determine the actual line of navigability. The closest dock to the east is the City of Coeur d'Alene's public dock for the seaplane and parasailing companies. The closest dock to the west is the public swimming dock adjacent to North Idaho College property. The proposed single family dock for Sternberg would not extend out into the lake as the two docks mentioned above. Distance from littoral lines, IDAPA 20.03.04.015.13E provides in pertinent part that single family docks will have an adverse effect upon adjacent littoral rights if located closer than 10 feet for adjacent littoral right lines. The proposed dock appears to provide a 10-foot buffer to the west and a 24-foot buffer to the east. In conclusion, Idaho Code 58-1305C provides that IDL, acting on behalf of the land board, may set a hearing regarding a single-family dock application when it deems it advisable due to the existence of unusual circumstances. See also IDAPA 20.03.040.025.04. The unusual circumstances with this application are the Idaho Supreme Court's decision in DuPont and the continued existence of a designated swimming area in front of Sternberg's littoral property. As noted above, in the DuPont case, the Idaho Supreme Court affirmed agency's decision to revoke DuPont's permit. Specifically, the court found that the existence of a designated swimming area with the related boating restrictions found in the city of Coeur d'Alene's ordinances and the Idaho Safe Boating Act constituted unusual circumstances. In addition, the court found that it would make little sense for IDL to grant an encroachment permit for a navigational encroachment when boating was prohibited under city ordinance and state law in a designated swimming area. The city of Coeur d'Alene has a current code, chapter 4.20, regarding a public swimming area in this location, which is exhibit IDL-6. The city has designated the area in front of the Sternberg property, as well as all of the 13 lots described above, as a public swimming area. City CDA code 4.20.030 as well. Under the city code, no person shall operate, navigate, cause to float, moor, or anchor any motor-driven watercraft or toy boat of any length or any sail-powered vessel longer than 20 feet within designated public swimming areas created by this chapter. Those restrictions on boating within the area where Sternberg's dock would be located constitute unusual circumstances that warrant denial of this application. Similarly, as DuPont Court further noted, the Idaho Safe Boating Act provides in pertinent part that it shall be unlawful for any person to operate a vessel on the water of this state in any area which has been clearly marked in accordance with and is authorized by the laws of the state, by buoys or some other distinguishing device as a bathing, swimming, or other restricted area. The city of Coeur d'Alene holds encroachment permit number L95S2809C and D for buoys at certain areas of Lake Coeur d'Alene, including the city beach area in front of the Sternberg property. That restriction further constitutes an unusual circumstance that warrants denial of the application. Moreover, to grant the application would put IDL in the impossible position of authorizing a navigational encroachment, a boat dock, in an area over the lake where boating is not allowed under local and state law. If Sternberg is not allowed to use or moor a boat at the proposed single-family dock, the dock would no longer be considered a navigational encroachment, but rather a non-navigational encroachment. IDAPA 20.03.04.030.02 states in pertinent part that encroachments not in the aid of navigation and navigable lakes will normally not be approved by the department and will be considered only in cases involving major environmental, economic, or social benefits to the general public. IDL has determined that a dock that only serves one waterfront owner does not provide a major benefit to the general public of Idaho. The drawings that were submitted by Sternberg all appear to meet the single-family dock standards that are listed under IDAPA 20.03.04.015.01. The proposed dock is 700 square feet or less. The proposed dock does not appear to extend beyond the line of navigation. The proposed dock does not exceed 10 feet in width. And additionally, the proposed dock provides at least a 10-foot buffer to adjacent littoral right lines. However, based on the Idaho Supreme Court's decision in DuPont, the city code and the Idaho Safe Boating Act, IDL recommends the application be denied. I'd also like to point out that it also seems unusual that of 13 prime waterfront lots in the heart of downtown Coeur d'Alene, there are currently no docks in this location, which I also feel is an unusual circumstance. And that concludes my hearing statement, Mr. Hearing Officer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Amer. Mr. Frantz, let's go back to you. Do you have any questions for Mr. Amer regarding the testimony from the Department of Lands?
I don't actually. I don't have any questions for him, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, Ms. Kaufman, was there anything else you or Mr. Amer wanted to say at this time?
No, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and so at this point, I would like to give the parties a chance to make closing statements and then hear any comments of other folks on the line. I know we had one adjacent owner support the application, and I think it's probably more appropriate to hear from them after we've heard the closing arguments and put that in with any other comments that folks on the line may want to make as part of a public hearing. So with that in mind, let's go back to you, Mr. France. You just offered to make a closing and I said no, but I think at this point, I think closing arguments would be appropriate if you're ready to do that at this point. And if anyone needs a break before we get into that, that's fine. Just speak up and let me know. Otherwise, we can go ahead and proceed. Mr. France?
Thank you, sir. So I do want to just jump back and just clarify a couple of things. Some of the arguments that we're hearing, one being the slippery slope, you know, that's something very contingent over which nobody here has any control at this particular hearing. And what I mean by that is, you know, I don't think denying the application because there might be other applications is an appropriate item to consider at this time. There could be, I'm sure the city's position is that they won't, but if we're looking at future things, maybe the buoys go away, maybe things change, ordinances come and go, you know, that area hasn't always been a designated swimming area, though it has been for some time. Basing a decision on what may happen in the future from other parties, I just don't think is an appropriate consideration for this particular hearing. I also would like to go back and look at, you know, re-look at this statute or the city code. If you do look at the city code, I would note that there's no commas written in there. So the general rules of construction, you know, when you're looking at statutes and written codes, you know, you've got those commas that separate out different ideas. But here we have the idea that you're not supposed to drive any watercraft or toy boat of any length or any sail powered vessel longer than 20 feet. There's no comma in between those. There's nothing that distinguishes the 20 feet is applied and applicable only to sail powered vessels. That is something that the rules of statutory construction, if they wanted to distinguish that, they would have distinguished that with commas. So we do have that. I understand the city's position is otherwise. But ultimately, I don't think it matters anyway. So the argument and what's been discussed is, okay, if we've got a dock that can't be served by a boat, well, that's not true, because it can be. It doesn't matter if that boat is sail powered. It can have boat moorage there, whether it's if it's a sailboat or year round, or if it's a motorboat during times when those buoys aren't there. And again, I understand there's some testimony and evidence about, and I think that's a little conflicting about, well, these buoys are marked, with no boating. Well, that's that. If they are, they shouldn't be, because the city code itself states that the buoys should be in compliance. And I already read that section. The buoys should be in compliance with what this chapter establishes, and those buoys don't prohibit boats. Let's say the city's interpretation is accurate. It only prohibits motorboats or sailboats greater than 20 feet. So no boating is not an accurate statement of the law, and those buoys shouldn't be marked like that if they are. Now, the other thing we heard is, Mr. Sternberg indicated that there was no writing on them, that there was just the orange bands, and it sounds like it's not uncommon for these buoys to lose their markings. So, I mean, that's something that it sounds like the city is going to be working on, but still, when it's preparing its markings, it should be marking them appropriately. And to the extent that it's, we're looking at future stuff here. To the extent it's marking them inappropriately, that's a problem. And moreover, as far as leaving them through, year round, the existing encroachment permit specifically says May to October. So it sounds like the city, again, would have to be submitting an additional application to get year-round buoys placed there. But that's not before this hearing. You know, and I don't think that those are things that should be considered. I think that if, and I'm making these arguments only to the extent that you do consider them, but you know, what we're looking at is Mr. Sternberg has his trust, for which he's the trustee, has a right to get a single family dock. If there's unusual circumstances, those can be a basis to deny the application. It's not mandatory. It's not mandatory to deny an application because of that. And the question of whether or not these are unusual circumstances, would it be unusual to have a boat that can be used 6 months out of the year for whatever purpose a dock is regularly used for? And I said boat earlier, I meant dock. And then for it to be used during 6 months of the year for small sailing vessels? Is that unusual? I don't think it is. I don't think it's, and to the extent that it is unusual, I don't think it's anything that merits denial of this application. What we've got, you know, we've got city codes that designate swimming only areas and swim areas that contemplate boat traffic. The city itself, and I know they're saying that they don't, but you go through and read their ordinance. You've got one where we've already talked about it, where it's a swimming area that contemplates at least sailboats less than 20 feet. But I believe as you read the ordinance, it contemplates both types of boats that are at least 20 feet in length. And then you have the paragraph under it where it designates swimming only areas, which say no boats. Why would the city, if the city wanted no boats, why would they create two designations? And then why would they designate one area that's hundreds of yards away from my client's property? Why would they designate that area as a swimming only and then a swimming area in front of Mr. Sternberg's? If the city really truly believed that it was dangerous to have sailboats at the very least, you know, going in through that area, then why would they write that into their city code? That doesn't make sense. I understand the arguments that are being presented, you know, today, but if you look at the statutes, if you look at the code, there is no prohibition for half of the year, and then there's not a complete prohibition for part of the year. Mr. Sternberg has a right to have the dock there. He's got the riparian rights. It's completely built within the or designed within what the statutes and regulations require. Having swimmers exist around docks is not necessarily in and of itself an unusual circumstance. And for that, we do request a recommendation that his application be approved. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Friends. All right, Mr. Gridley, let's go to you. Do you have anything further to say, whether it be in the form of a closing argument or anything that you heard that came up in the other testimony that you wanted to address before we conclude the hearing?
Now, I appreciate Mr. Franz's energy over this issue, but I think it's pretty clear, and I've been the city attorney for 20 years, and it's clear the intent of this was to prohibit certainly motorboats and boats that would be dangerous to swimmers if you want to take a paddleboard in or something else. But I think our statute, or I'm sorry, our ordinance that is authorized by state statute has clearly designated a swimming area, whether buoys are there or not. We have designated that swimming area. Ignorance of the law or ignorance of that ordinance is not an excuse. So we would say that an encroachment would be contrary to city law, against state authorized city ordinance, and would be a danger and a detriment to the general community. If we have estimated 100,000 people or so using it a year, multiply that times whatever number of years, there have been millions of people use that, and to take that away to benefit one owner, I think is not in the community's interest. So thank you for your time. I think that's all we have.
All right, thank you. Mr. Greenwood, was there anything you wanted to add?
Certainly. I just want one thing, and I appreciate everybody's time. Mr. Friends continues to go back to this, our permits, our code rather, 4.20.020, and reads number 1. And somebody earlier read the other one underneath this. No person shall operate, navigate, cause to float, moor, or anchor any vessel, toy, boat within designated public swim areas created in this chapter. He keeps going back to it, and it's like they're not allowed to operate. It's very clear. And so that's all I've got to say about that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kaufman, was there anything you wanted to say from Department of Lands in closing?
Yeah, I have just a little bit, and then I think Mr. Amer has a couple of points to make. You know, my point is about the DuPont case. It's Supreme Court precedent, and it is binding on this agency despite council's good arguments, which I respect, that it speaks in permissive rather than mandatory terms. It is Supreme Court precedent. The DuPont property is directly adjacent to the property that is now owned by Mr. Sternberg. The city ordinances, for all intents and purposes, were the same. I see very little to distinguish the circumstances in DuPont from those present before us today. So I would just note that. And then just one final point about the city ordinance. Perhaps it could benefit from a comma within it, but to give it the reading suggested by the applicant and his counsel would be to simply read out of the ordinance the words boat of any length. And I don't think that that's what the city has intended at all. So with that, I will just wrap up and let Mr. Amer say anything, add anything in additional he might feel important at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Hearing Officer, I'd just like to note that a kayak needs to be registered as a vessel within the state. And I believe also a paddleboard does as well. I do not work for the city. I did not write the ordinances, but perhaps that's why there's a distinguishing factor between swimming only areas and swimming areas. Maybe perhaps the intent was they did not want people kayaking and stand-up paddleboarding within that swimming area. Whereas if it's not in a swimming only area, a kayak and a paddleboard would be acceptable. And the other point I'd like to make in conclusion, Mr. Hearing Officer, is that if it was granted, and if Mr. Franz is correct in some of his assumptions about the size of the boats and the timing of the boats, I'd just like to point out who is responsible for keeping an eye on, and for lack of a better word or phrase, babysitting the Sternberg dock to ensure that there isn't a sailboat longer than 20 feet there, or that there's not a motor-powered boat being operated in the summertime. I believe it would create somewhat of a maintenance headache for both the city and Department of Lands to try to figure out if that ordinance was being violated. And that's all I have today, Mr. Hearing Officer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Amer. I was just finishing some notes here on my end. All right, thank you. All right, well, let's open it up a little bit to people who have been observing and listening on the line. I do know there was a comment in support of applicants' application for the dock by Ms. Stroh, and I think she's on the line. Linda Stroh, are you on the line, and would you like to make a comment before we conclude the hearing?
Well, I would just say that I think that Mr. Franz has done an excellent job of countering most of the city's arguments against denying the application, and that there appears to be no logical or legal reason to make that denial, and that our email and thoughts stand in support of Mr. Sternberg's application.
Okay, thank you. All right, Dan Brown is on the line. Mr. Brown, would you like to make a comment on this hearing?
Mr. Hearing Officer, Dan Brown is the area manager of the Priest Lake IDL office.
Okay,
I believe Dan Brown, Eric Wilson, Ryan Zanhusen, and JJ Winters are all IDL representatives that are just observing today.
gotcha. Okay. All right, thank you. That would leave us, I think, with JJ Winters. Would you like to make a comment if you're not with the state?
I'm just observing, thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, Will, it sounds like we've heard from everyone and has given any observer a chance to speak who wanted to. So, oh, Mag, all right. Yeah,
Yeah, may I make a statement?
yes, of course. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'd like to mention that first off, just to kind of give you my background. I've lived in Coeur d'Alene about 30 years and I grew up in the area. I've lived in the Fort Grounds neighborhood here for 19 years. And that beach, section of beach we're talking about is where my children have grown up swimming. Part of my feelings are emotional because we have a very nice community and a dock like that would change everything. But I would also like to point out that every winter, the water recedes very far. I believe it's the Post Falls Dam. I'm not sure how that all works. Right now, the water's up because of the recent rain and snow, melting. But the water extends way far out in the winter. You can see the stumps of old docks, and there's no way a boat could come up anywhere near Mr. Sternberg's section of beach when he's talking about he sees boats on the water all year round. And that's true. There are boats out there, but they're nowhere near the designated swimming area. And what I've known is, ever since we've lived here is that entire area from the North Idaho College Beach all the way to the city beach. That's all a designated swim area, and there's buoys out there. I've seen boats get tickets for coming in too close by the boat police. I think it's city police that are the boats. Anyways, just because he is saying those buoys don't specifically say something, I guess it goes along with that idea of ignorance of the law, isn't an excuse. But like I said, I've personally witnessed that area being patrolled as a designated swimming area. And it's been a designated swimming area for 60 years. So yes, things may change, but yeah. Anyways, that's my biggest point, was the receding water. There's no way a boat could come anywhere near that area. So that's all I have to say.
Okay. All right. Thank you for adding that. So I will consider everything that has been said by the parties during this hearing, as well as the written documents that were sent in support of the various positions. And I will issue an order on this within 30 days from today's hearing date. So we can go ahead and conclude the hearing. And Chris, if you'll go ahead and stop recording. And this hearing has concluded. So all the participants and observers may disconnect now. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day. Thank you.
If I have just a brief minute, and actually, while we're here on Zoom, I've never met Ms. Kaufman before, but I presume, Ms. Kaufman, are you a Deputy Attorney General up here in this area?
I'm a Deputy Attorney General. I'm based